Good morning, fancy meat computers. How's everybody? How's everybody today? Today. Wah wah. Get some sunlight up in here. "15 participants. This has to be a new record." Oh man, you should be in my my third year class. It's like 120 students. I consistently get like the max that the lecture will hit is like 12 to 15. Yeah, you know, it's like, I don't care really. Lin-alg? Yeah, there's a linear algebra. Yeah. First strike of linear algebra. They gave you a linear algebra exam, but at what cost? When is the final exam? Excellent question. Excellent question. Let's take... Is it back? Okay. I can't see that in the preview yet, but 240p. Ha ha ho ho. Let's just wait. Let's give the stream like a minute or two to get its pants back on, shall we? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna try. Yeah, I like OBS is telling me I have a good bit rate now, but I'm not seeing my preview, so I'm gonna... Joke's on you, I always watch on 240p. Oh man. Alright, let's see here. Hopefully this doesn't screw anything up. There we go. Seems like everything is operational. There we go. Alright. Good. Perfect. Alright. Pixels of Dr. Moore. That's Mr. Dr. Moore to you. I don't have my PhD yet. I'm working on it. So, yeah, let me... Doesn't appear to be in the syllabus, so let me just look on Avenue quickly. It's kind of funny. This semester I'm teaching more courses than some people are taking. Gotta search for exam. Let's see. Exam date set. Aha! Yeah. So, the exam starts 9 a.m. on the 21st of December, and it finishes at 9 a.m. on the 22nd of December. There are 6 people in the class who have a conflict. If you are one of these people, shoot me an email. Hopefully I don't get all of those people telling me on the 20th. But yeah. If Dr. Pepper can be considered a doctor, then so can I. Ha! Is the audio being terrible? Let me see. It seems to be coming through fine on my end. Keeps cutting in and out. You know what? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to perform a manual interrupt on the stream and like start the data stream fresh. Maybe that'll help. All right. Let me tell you, it'd be a lot more hassle on Windows. Good. Are you sure that it's like the audio that's stuttering, or is it maybe just me? Let me hear it, 720p gang. 720p gang, 720p gang. Anyway, so, the audio is better. Ha! There we go. I fixed it. So, I might as well get on with our lecture material today. I think the audio is normal now? Good. I just applied the usual IT crowd solution, which is to turn it off and on again. It's definitely the audio, the whole thing becomes muted. Yeah, I don't know. The audio is good. Okay. Sounds good, you guys. So, we were talking about CSV files. We had just done an example of reading in a CSV file. Exit and then re-enter for the audio fix. Ah, so you can turn it off and on again on your end as well. That would be good. So, where is, yeah, so sample.csv, and we have, what were we called? io.py, yeah. So, just briefly to recap what we were doing last time, the CSV reader library is really quite easy. It allows you to read in the data that's contained in the tabular format of the CSV file as if it were a bunch of lists. So if we fire this bad boy up, you can get all of everything as a bunch of lists. So so there's an alternative to this called the dictionary reader. So the default reader just reads everything in the form of it just, the raw data gets written as raw lists. However, the way that CSV files are actually organized is that you have an optional header row that specifies what all of the fields should be, right? So it would be cool if we could actually use that information. So we have what is called the CSV dict reader. Have to be very careful when pronouncing that. And you can see, by changing from reader to dictionary reader, rather than getting a bunch of lists with the values in them, we get a bunch of dictionaries with the values in them, where the keys of each dictionary are the values of the header row of the CSV file, which is kind of cool and useful. That way you can address the data by its actual header within your Python script. You don't have to, remember that the third column is, test score. You can just, say, for row in table get test score. You can do stuff like that, which is much more fluid, right? So that's much better. Good. If the first line of the CSV file is a header row, we can use dict reader instead of CSV reader to get each row as a dictionary. Of course, the price that you have to pay to be able to access this is knowledge. you have to know that the CSV file that you're reading has a header row. Otherwise, you'll just cannibalize one of your data lines into a header row, which, you know, is not what you want. It needs to have a header row for this to be applicable, and it doesn't know, like, it's not going to trip an error if you apply the dictionary reader in the wrong way, right? I think if you just print the data instead of the row, you just get one big dictionary. I might be wrong though. Yeah, maybe. So if you print the data is stored in an object. So if you just print it like this, you get CSV dict reader object at, you know, like it's the way that it always prints objects by default, right? However, if you like list convert it, maybe you'll get a list of dictionaries. Yeah, you can get a list of dictionaries by list converting the data. And if it's just a regular reader and not a dictionary reader, you get a list of lists. So it's not just one big list or one big dictionary. It is a list of lists or a list of dictionaries. So it's a two-dimensional data structure, not a one-dimensional data structure, but it's still, you know, that's fine. Yeah, you know? Either way, it works. I'm assuming that even if we were dealing with JSON files, we convert content to the dictionary using JSON.dictReader. That would be an incorrect assumption, actually. A lot of these different libraries have been written by different people at different times, so they'll often use slightly different method names for similar operations. Once we get into JSON, you'll see that the method names for JSON and even the procedure to reading a JSON is not exactly the same as reading in a CSV file. So you really should, like, make yourself a quick reference sheet for what the methods are. Or, you know, failing that, just read it off the slides. So, writing. So, writing is just as fun as reading. The procedure in general is the procedure for all file interaction. Open the file, write the object into the file, and then close the file when you're finished. So, you've got... So the way that this works, let me just grab this. We'll extend our previous example. No, not that. Here we go. So we've acquired the data from the CSV reader, right? Let's just make that a dictionary. So dict reader. And let's say, let's say data is equal to list data. So we convert it to a list so that it's nice to work with. For entry in data, entry at field B, like field B is equal to, convert it to an int, add 7, convert it back to a string. Sure, just, you know, some random operation that will, so that we can, like, some trivial transformation of the data so that we can see that it's different before and after, right? So then, with open sample.csv.out in write mode, or as file handle. So we want to say writer is equal to csv.writer file handle. So this the correct way to think about this line is that it's an object instantiation. So you are creating a writer object, a CSV writer object, which we are then going to funnel the data into, and that's going to eventually write it into the file. So, for entry in data, and I see it, thank you. Writer dot write row entry dot keys, or not keys, dot values, because remember these are dictionaries, right? So you want to write all of the values, but you also want to put the header row back in. So writer dot write row data at data element 0 dot keys. There we go. And I think that this shall, I think this should work. Field B, key error. Key error, you say? Print data. Let's see that data. Print entry. Am I, like, did I misspell field? Did I misspell it? What's going on here? There's an empty space before field B. Oh! There friggin' is. Thank you. Well, I think that should be actually fixed in the file itself, shouldn't it? Thank you. That would have taken me a while to find out myself. Yeah, thank you. There. So that's actually a good thing to know. If you put spaces in the CSV file, those spaces will be transferred through. There you go. So, now that that script is successfully executed, we should have, yep, sample.csv.out. So let's cat sample.csv. So that's sample.csv, and then cat sample.csv.out. And you can see that the second row has been incremented by 7. So there you go. You pull the data in, you apply a transformation, you write the data back again. There we go. So, if you put a file name that doesn't exist into open, does Python create a new file with that name? When it's in write mode, yes. When it's in write mode. If you're trying to read a file that doesn't exist, that makes a lot less sense, right? It's like, how can you read something that doesn't exist? It doesn't make any sense. But if you're writing a new, like, that's how you create a new file to write in. Yes, is you just pick a file name, basically. Can I explain after the lecture why modifying the self object in a function results in some weird output, and we should always make a new object and return that? I could have a crack at that one. For JSON, you can import JSON, and then you can just do JSON.load to load from a file, or JSON load as to load from a string. Yes, we'll get there. We'll get there. Why do you have to use sample.csv.out? I don't have to. I could name it anything I want, right? It's just that to me, that was like a good name for it because it's mnemonic, right? It's like, I know that that's the output file when processing sample.csv, right? It's like, also, like, if you wanted to do something cool, like make the file name so that it was like a variable, right? So let's say input file .csv.out input file, right? And you did something like import sys and sys dot let's say input file is equal to sys.argv. I know I'm probably breaking all of your brains with this, but I think it would be 2, but we can print it. Just let's just print sys.argv. That's command line arguments. Sys.argv is a way to do command line arguments. So I hope I'm getting this correct. So let's see, Python 3 io.py. These are command line arguments. Are. Oh, let's just print this. There. Did I save that? Oh, yeah, I removed it in the wrong place. Yeah. So when you so whatever command line arguments are given to your program, they end up in system.argv. In Python, like in other languages, this is more tricky to use, but with system.argv, like in Python, it's just a list, so you can just index it, or you can find the number of input arguments with len, but yeah, it doesn't consider the invocation of Python itself to be an input argument. So if I capture the first one, that is to say the second one, and I say something like python io.py sample.csv, index out of range. What am I doing? Where am I doing that? I'm not. Save. There we go. Sample.csv. So it just, like, I can specify the file name from the command line, right? Which means that if I, like that, obviously the sample.csv.out already existed, but if I remove it, .csv.out, right? It's no longer there. Execute. There we go. You can see it's back. So it'll procedurally generate the new file name based on the input file name. So there you go. Why convert the modified entries to a string? Hygiene. If not, like, there's no reason for it, really. Like, Python will do that implicitly in the write operation. It's just, like, hygienic for me. I don't know. It's like you write a string to a file. That's just the way my brain works. So it's like I like to see it done explicitly. But no, it's not necessary. It's just for my own brain problems. There you go. All right. So, if your data is already represented as a list of lists, then you can write it all at once. So if you write rows rather than write a single row, you can write all of them. What if your field contains a comma? So if your field in a CSV file contains a comma, you should put that in quotes. Easy. The CSV writer is designed to automatically handle this. So sometimes accented characters, other alphabets, and emoji can be tricky, especially when trying to exchange between Excel and other programs. Sometimes people use delimiters instead of commas. So sometimes these are tab separated, sometimes they're vertical bar separated, Sometimes they're space separated. You know, it's just by preference. Comma is like the most used one by far, though. If you want to grab CSV data, there's all kinds of it available on the internet, and you can do that at your pleasure. Yeah, let me just give you one quick demo. Let's get it. Sample.csv. Let's throw some weird characters in there. There we go. So these are characters from the Cyrillic alphabet. Let's see if they load. They do! With no problems. But they probably wouldn't if it was an Excel file. Russian nuclear launch codes. Now these are just like arrangements of letters that are not actual words. I have been learning Russian like as a hobby, because it turns out that like in the modern era you can actually learn a language exclusively while sitting on the toilet. So that's what I've been doing. To further my learning of Russian, I actually purchased like Russian character stickers for my keyboard, which is kind of fun. And in Linux, I think in Windows as well. I don't think this is a Linux thing, but I know for me, like you can load like any kind of keyboard. Like there are a gajillion bazillion keyboards that you can load, and it's actually mapped to smiley face button on this super fancy ergonomic keyboard. So I can just swap between like English and Russian using the smiley face key. Which is like very fun and fast and efficient. But yeah, so anyway, non-standard characters, like all of the Cyrillic characters are in UTF-8, I think. So this is, or UTF-16 probably. So this is a good test to see if you can handle Unicode characters, and we can. So there you go. I almost did that for the language I'm learning, but just memorized the keyboard. Yes. Yeah. I'm actually doing pretty well with it. It's like... Yeah. Anyway. What about emojis? Yeah, emojis would work as well. Emojis are all just Unicode characters, so they would also work. Good. So. So, let's talk about JSON. So what is a JSON? JSON is, it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JSON was originally developed as a subset of the JavaScript programming language, and its original intention was for representing objects. So it gained widespread popularity and is now, like, generally speaking, it's a very common format for representing data that is hierarchical in nature and is composed of both lists and dictionaries, which, as you like, hopefully you guys you'll be able to appreciate by now that if you have lists and you have dictionaries, then you've got pretty much any data structure that you would care to make in Python. Weird question, but can you use emojis as variable names in Python, like in Swift? I believe you can, but, you know, I'm not going to demonstrate it. How many topics do we have left? We have the remainder of this one. We have dates, we have visualization, we have databases. I'm not sure if we're going to get to machine learning. Yeah. That sounds extraordinarily cursed. Yes. Uh, yes. Um, so. So yeah. Although it's still called JavaScript Object Notation, it's considered to be language independent. Commonly used for transmitting objects between applications. So CSV is useful for transmitting tabularized data. JSON is like useful if you have an object in like one program, you have to save everything about that object and transfer that to a different program. JSON is what you want there. Incidentally, another useful and interesting thing to know about JSON, you know your Jupyter notebooks, like the notebook files that you guys have been laboriously implementing over the course of this course? Under the hood, those are JSON files. I can show you this. I think I got one right here. Yeah, here we go. So, this is a JSON file. But it's also a Jupyter notebook. So what the Jupyter environment really is it's a renderer for JSONs. Now it expects the JSON to be in a particular format, right? It expects it to have like code cells and markdown cells, but in general, the Jupyter notebook itself is in JSON format. So it's like this specific type of JSON is a Jupyter notebook. But you'll notice it uses a different file extension, .ipynb, because it's like, although it is a JSON in the most general sense, it's a more specific type of JSON, and it's useful to designate it as that very specific type of JSON. Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah, the computer won't care, so, you know, since it's a computer that's marking your work, it doesn't really matter if you do use emojis exclusively for your variable names. Which is not permission. So the basic format of JSON, you have a hierarchical nesting of elements, right? These elements can be any of the following, right? So an element in a JSON could be a list, it could be a dictionary, it could be a number, a string, a boolean. And, you know, and I see that float has been misspelled. Great. So lists are enclosed with square braces. Dictionaries are enclosed with curly braces. With a dictionary, it basically conforms to the way that Python does things. However, the one big difference between dictionaries in Python and dictionaries in a JSON file is that in a JSON file, the keys are only allowed to be strings. So every key is a quoted string. There's a colon between the key and the value can be any type of entry. So the thing that makes a JSON hierarchical is that, you know, well, similarly to how this thing works, the top level here is a dictionary. So the top level in any Jupyter notebook is a dictionary. You've got a dictionary label called cells. That points to a list of cells. Each cell is a dictionary with like fields, cell type, metadata, and source, right? Possibly more arguments than that. So markdown cells are pretty simple, but code cells also tell you, for example, what the output of the cell was, right? As well as the source. And then, you know, attached to the end of the JSON, after cells, you've got You've got a field for metadata, which is a bunch of dictionaries, and it's nested hierarchically, right? I think the autograder would be fine, but it can break whoever reads the code. Including the original developer. Yes! Yes, indeed. Generally speaking, computers are more fragile than humans, but not necessarily. So, in a JSON file, white space doesn't matter. So things like spaces, tabs, line breaks, they don't matter. You can have as many or as few of them, as many or as few of them. Yeah, that's correct. As you like, you know. Primarily, like, people tend to, like, tab in the nesting, like, tab to the nesting level, the same way that Python, like, code is tabbed to the nesting level. But, you know, there's nothing in the format that requires it. So, how do we go about reading said thing? The JSON module contains functions for working with JSON data. So, in general, this is your procedure. I think that someone in the chat said that you could just not load S. We can try that out. But you open the file, as usual. You read the string in, using your regular read function, and then you load the string with json.loads, and that gives you the data as a string. So let's take a look-see, shall we? I need a new tab. There we go. Thank you. So okay, so with open input file, we'll keep that bit in read mode as file handle. There we go. String is equal to file handle.read. Data is equal to json.loads. I want to do it the way the slides did it first, just to make sure that it worked. Like, I want to show you a working example before we do anything else, right? Then print data. See if that works. Python 3 io.py, and this one will be untitled. What is it again? Yeah. Untitled.ipynb. Traceback. JSON. I need to... There we go. There we go. So once you actually load the library, everything is cool. You can see that this is not, like, formatted particularly nicely, right? But this is all of the data. And what it's done, like, you know, where cells was a dictionary, or where cells was an entry in the overall dictionary that pointed to a list of cells, you can see that that's been translated into Python's native data structures. So that's extremely useful. Good. Now let's see if just load works. JSON load file handle. Can that work? Yeah, frig, man. Why this line then? Slides? Why this line? Who the heck knows? I bet dump works without the S as well. Good God. All right. So, you can, where are we? Yes. You can convert any list or dictionary into a JSON string using the JSON.dumps function. If you want, then you can write this to a file in the normal way. So, why does just doing load work? I will answer your question. The S on the end of load says load this from a string. Load without the S means load this from a file handle. So it gives you two options, right? You know, it might be that you get intermediate results in the form of a string internal to a program. It's never actually written to a file. So there could be some utility in having, like in theory, if you have a subroutine that loads it from a file and then parses it as a JSON, like there's no reason you couldn't like make available a method that just, you know, reads it from a string and not from just a JSON, like not from a file, but just reads a string and just parses that string, right? It'd be useful for debugging purposes, but yeah. That's kind of how it works. So, interesting one. I've actually done this as a test question before. So, if you read in... So we'll do writing a JSON now. So let's say you're reading in data from a CSV file and you want to convert it to a JSON, right? For this, we have a list of dictionaries, which a list of dictionaries is something that you can send to a JSON, right? So let's dump JSON.dump, or what is it? How does the syntax go? Let's take a look. I'm going to have to look up how to use JSON.dump. Okay, so it's just takes two arguments. The second one is the output file name, okay, or the output file handle. So it's json.dump data, comma, file handle. And then like there's an optional parameter for like indent level, but whatever. All right, so let's take a look. Unsupported operation not writable. Oh, well that's because it's in read mode. That would make sense. I will fix. Ha! There we go. So, if we take a look at untitled, wait, untitled? What? This should be interesting, because this was incorrect. Very strange. Weird. Okay, well that didn't work. Let's try it again, shall we? But with the correct data this time. So rather than say out, let's say out .json.out. Just to distinguish it. And let's do actual CSV data, shall we? There we go. So we have sample.csv.json.out, cat, Sample .csv .json.out. There we go. Ha! That's interesting. So see what it's done here to the Unicode characters? That's like, so this is what a Unicode character looks like when it's been printed out incorrectly. So sometimes Unicode characters work, sometimes they don't. Yeah. Does it need to be dump S, or does that not matter for the same reason? That does not matter for the same reason. You'll notice that I skipped the part where I demonstrate it with dump S and just went straight to dump. Don't take that out of context, Ryan. Maybe I got lucky and Ryan isn't watching today. But yeah, so you can see this is valid JSON, right? It's a list that contains dictionaries, that contains values. Good. So that's JSONs. If you want JSON data sources, many websites provide access to some their data in an automated way via a web application programming interface, or API. Data returned from web APIs is often in JSON format. Good examples, you can actually like skim data off of Facebook, Instagram, or the Twitters, and you'll get it back in JSON format. This is like a really cramped text, but you know. So this is like information that had been skimmed off of Instagram, which, as you can see, is in JSON format. Rest. Shush. Actually, I just posted a meme about that, like literally yesterday. I have to bring up that meme now. Yep. It's only REST if it's developed in the REST region of France. Otherwise, it's just sparkling JSON. That's a joke about champagne. So, anyway. So, we have like 2 minutes left. Probably not enough to do YAML or even really get into it. But YAML, like, in general, I'll just briefly tell you what a YAML file is. Slowly sinking over time. YAML is like JSON. Like, one of the things you may have noticed about JSON is, like, while it is perfectly readable to a computer, you can imagine that working with it as a person would be a pain in the ass, right? Like, CSV files are reasonably straightforward for a person to make modifications to, so long as they aren't too big, right? It's like, it's tabular data, we can work with spreadsheets, even if they're in plain text, it's fine. But, like, all of the nesting levels and all of the braces and quotes all over the place just makes it, you know, in the same way that the Python programming language took C and it was like, you have too many redundant braces, I'm going to get rid of all of them and replace them with indentation. YAML, which stands for yet another markup language, looked at JSON and was like, you know what, you're doing really great, but I see so many redundant parentheses here, I'm going to replace them all with indentation. So it's kind of like YAML is to JSON as Python is to C to some extent. That's a good, like, first pass approximation of it anyway. So yeah, any questions? Wait, when I do it and then I open the JSON file to see if it worked, it's empty. Yeah. The question I asked about objects. Oh. What does what does simps do again? That has a different meaning in the modern internet context, doesn't it? Yeah, I'll answer that. Tanya, you're getting an empty file probably because you need, like, look at the data and make sure you're loading it correctly before you're writing it. JSON is still the norm for APIs, absolutely. YAML is more for configuration files, which are things that human beings typically have to interact with at some point. So YAML is still pretty new, but it's gaining popularity, especially with configuration files. Docker uses YAML files, for instance. You'll see some of this stuff in 1xc3 if you take it with me, if I'm teaching it, which I hope I am. So, can I answer that? Yes. All right. Where was your question? Can I explain why modifying the self object in a function results in some weird output, and we should always make a new object and return that? So, two things occur to me in response to this. Number one, why would you ever need to modify self? Right? Like, the method is a modification of self, right? Like, when you modify self.l, you are modifying self, right? So, like, or the data contained in self. So it's like, generally speaking, things shouldn't try to kill themselves. It's like, so generally speaking, if you're doing if you're doing the vectors question, and you're returning the same vector again, it's like there's no need to return a reference to the object that you just called the method on, because if you have a reference to the object, unless you had a reference to the object, you wouldn't be able to call the method in the first place. So you already have a reference to the object. Why do you need to return a reference from the object? Doesn't make any sense, right? Aside from that, sometimes it makes sense to return a new object of the same class from an object. If two vectors add together and you get a third vector, it's like if you add if you add 3 and 7 together, the 10 that you get as a result of that is not a modification of the 3 or the 7. It is a new number, right? That's another way of thinking about it. And this is like the extension of that idea to objects. But yeah. Yeah. GraphQL is pretty nice for APIs too. Yes. College students are typing. Are there any college students watching this stream? All right. All right, folks. I think that's everything for today. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week. Have fun on the linear algebra midterm that you may or may not have written today or yesterday. I did not know about this stuff and almost had a heart attack doing the vector question last night. Yeah. When do you think you'll find out if you're teaching 1xc3? Well, the application process has, I think, been extended. I think they're having trouble finding applicants for the sessional positions that they have available So it's they extended I think they extended the application period for the initial block of 6 courses, and then they had 2 more courses that went up for sessional postings, which, you know, I think the deadline is like late November, and it's like normally, like, since I'm, like, you know, a frequent sessional in the department, it's kind of like, you know, normally there's a meeting between myself and my supervisor, and it's like, okay, what, let me hear what you would like to teach next semester, and I will take that into consideration when I decide who gets what. And you know, normally it's basically dependent on me making a good argument for teaching 1xc3, which I would be able to make a good argument for it because I've taught it in the past, you know. But yeah, probably I will not know until I probably won't know for sure until minimally like December 12th or something like that. Like, what, into the exam period. I don't expect to know until into the exam period. This is kind of one of the problems with being a sessional, is it's like, you don't know that you're teaching a course until like 2 weeks before it starts, in a lot of cases. Well, that's being a little unfair. 3 weeks before it starts. That's more usual. Whereas, you know, if I was a full-time employee, then I would have known, like, I would have known probably in like June, July, what I was teaching for the whole year. But, you know, such is the life of a sessional. Take her easy, folks. Don't do anything I wouldn't do.